A survey was recently conducted on Twitter to acquire data about MMTLP's share count. So, what do you need to know? Keep watching for the next 10 minutes as we go through recent news as well as my chart analysis and price prediction. But before we do that, subscribe to our channel Stox 101 for regular stock market updates. 2,172 investors were surveyed, and the average came out to 10.7 thousand shares per holder, with the total shares being 23.3 million. If this average is multiplied with the total estimated investors, which is 64,000, it would bring the total MMTLP share count to 688.8 million, but we're not yet finished. Whale investors hold a bigger portion, with Greg McCabe at 19.6 million, William Stewart at 17.8 million, David at 11.89 million, and John Berda himself at 2 million. Adding these numbers brings us to 740 million estimated total shares, which is 4.5 times higher than the issued 165.47 million shares. With all that in mind, let's analyze the charts. So as you guys can see right here, we're now in the 1 week chart for MMAT, and as always, well, not as always, but first we'll analyze the 1 week chart, then the 1 day chart, and turn it off, we'll get the 5 minute chart. Now before we do this, as always, we'll first talk about MMTLP, and of course, the main star of the show today is the survey, in order to find out how many shares were issued and how many shares were extra, right? That is of course a good amount of proof against this manipulation. So what are the numbers like? First up, we'll talk about the brokerages involved, right? So most of the people who were surveyed, the 19.7 million share data that we have, um, you know, 6.86 million shares were on TD Ameritrade, 4.23 million were on Fidelity, 2.35 on Schwab, 2.269 on E-Trade, and then the rest are pretty small, but at the same time, 685,000 on Robinhood and a small 400,000 on Webull. Now, of course, we did receive the most amount of complaints about TD Ameritrade, right? If you go over Twitter, search MMTLP, you'll find a ton of people complaining about TD Ameritrade. And of course, they do seem to be one of the main points in this entire problem. And of course, if we talk about the overall count and all of that stuff, I already told you guys that out of the 2,172 people that were surveyed, right, their total shares come out to 23.377 million, right? So 23.377904, right? So that's 23,377,904 shares, with the average shares per shareholder being 10,763. Now, if we base our total estimation off of this, it will reach a price, or well, not a price, but a total shareholding of 740,152,447 total shares, which of course will be owned by the total estimated 64,000 shareholders. So what does this mean? It means that about 574,680,206 shares are extra. And now, what exactly are extra shares? Well, as the name suggests, they're extra shares, right? They're basically shares that were not supposed to be in the market, but they still are on the market because, well, they got, they did not get manipulated. The company, the shareholders, the market got manipulated, and now there are more shares than they were supposed to be because in order for shorts to continue growing their position sizes and continue making money. So what they did was that they saw, hey, we need all of these shorts, or rather, we need all of these shares for these shorts to continue shorting, right? So the brokerages lent these extra shares, and at the same time, they lent those out to the short sellers. The sellers, of course, sold them, and now we have this entire imbalance going around. Now, this, of course, is an estimation, and we can't be sure if, this is the exact number, but I'm pretty sure that it will be somewhere around this, because even considering that, every shareholder has 10,000 shares, that is a pretty respectable number, right? That is a pretty decent, believable number, I would say. So I personally wouldn't debate too much on that part, right? The authenticity part. And at the same time, for those of you who want the sources, I'll link to this tweet and, of course, the survey link in the description, or rather in the pinned comment, so you can go there on Twitter and check it out for yourself. At the same time, we do have to talk about one thing, which of course is that sure, these shares were not supposed to be traded, but MMTLP in itself was never supposed to be traded, right? MMTLP was a preferred dividend, right? It was pretty much a placeholder offered to TRCH Torchlight holders. And of course, it was never supposed to be traded, but some things happened with GTS, Global Trade Systems, and Ari Rubinstein. And of course, well, in June 2021, I believe it was, right, the shares went live on the OTC markets. They started trading. Um, was it the OTC markets? I forgot. I'm pretty sure it was the OTC markets, right? Um, anyways, the main point is that sure, these shares are extra, but MMTLP in itself was an extra share, right? It was never supposed to be traded. So all of these problems, it was always, I would say, now, of course, I'm not blaming anyone or making any claims for legal reasons, right? I'm not saying anything or giving any advice of any sort, right? The only thing that I mean to say is all of this just seems really well planned out to me, right? It could have been really well planned, right? It could have been planned way long, like back in 2021 when they were about to do this in June, right? They might have planned it already and they were like, hey, we'll put this share on the market. We'll continue to short it because, of course, GTS, Ari Rubinstein, they did have, well, not GTS, but Ari Rubinstein himself did have an open short position against MMTLP. So, well, yeah, it does sound fishy. And of course, now we'll come back to MMAT, right? As for MMAT, we can see that, well, sure, the stock is currently in a bearish trend, but I do see a pattern which might repeat, right? We can see that over here when the stock pumped really hard and then fell down, we saw a crazy pump, right? And that is why I believe we might be able to kind of, continue with such a pattern again, because we can see that we got a crazy pump, right? We fell down to crazy levels, got a small pump like this one over here, right? And this one over here. And of course, we're currently falling like this. So we might be in for another pump towards the $4 to $5 ranges in the nearby months, in my opinion, right? And of course, I've already told you guys that I have somewhat of a pretty much a $9 to $10 target for 2023 end, right? And I hope that it will be achieved because, of course, MMAT is a luck-based play in my opinion, right? The amount of patents, the amount of technologies they have, if they work out, well, great, the stock will, probably hit 100x, not even 100x, but like 20, 30x, right? And if, of course, they don't play out, well, it is a risky bet. So, of course, this is not financial advice, but with that, we'll move on into the one-day chart. And now that we're in the one-day chart again, we can see that, well, we did analyze the stock already on 30th December in the same chart. So what's new? Well, considering the news part, of course, we do have um, the event from 5th and 7th of January, right? I can keep forgetting that it's January now and December has ended. Of course, if we look at the volumes, we can see that, sure, there have been somewhat of a dry volume trend, right? There have been some dry volume trends, but at the same time, we can see that we have still improved in terms of average volume every, from this period, July to October. Right now, as for November and December, and hopefully going on into January, we will get better volumes. And as we get better volume, I hope we will get more holders. If we get more holders, the company does more stuff, and bingo, the company does good stuff, right? That is again, hopeful thinking, I would say, probably wishful thinking. But at the same time, I do believe it can happen. George Palikaras is not exactly sitting in silence. We've already discussed this in a previous video that George is out there and he is working, right? He did say that silence does not mean inaction. So I personally hope that it is completely true. And well, all of you guys, all of it, all of the MMTLP holders get justice. And of course, that is why I would probably plead you to comment down below justice for MMTLP or something like that. So of course, we can see the volumes going on, right? So we can see how many of you are actually motivated to get the justice. And with that, I believe there's nothing much to analyze in the one-day chart. So let's jump on into the 5-minute charts. And now that we're in the 5-minute chart, well, first up, we have to kind of figure out what's going to happen on this day, right? Tuesday. So, well, we don't have Friday's data for some reason, but never mind. What's going to happen on Tuesday, in my opinion, is that we might, or rather, we will likely get a gap down, right? A small gap down towards 1.16, I would say, and then we'll proceed to get a bull run towards 1.25, get resisted, probably catch on to these 1.25, $1.2 levels by the end of the day, right? And why do I say that? Well, if we do that, we'll pretty much be ready for another bull run because then we might be able to get a huge candle this week, and that candle will likely push the stock towards $1.5. Once that is done, we can be assured that the stock is going to pump up really high in the month of January. But then again, I could be wrong. So remember that this most definitely is not financial advice, and you should always do your own research before you trade. If, however, you enjoyed my analysis, be sure to hit the like button. If you did not enjoy it, sure, you can hit the dislike button. You can subscribe to our channel, Stox 101, for more such videos. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one.